Well, hello there. This is Brent Smith. I'm the Common Constitutionalist, and this is my weekend video podcast of the Common Constitutionalist. And it hasn't been a video podcast in a while. I've had some technical issues. I've had some other issues, some things that I need to take care of. Just frankly run out of time, do all sorts of things. But I'm back to doing the video. The weather's kind of conducive to it. We didn't get the huge nor'easter up here. We were spared somehow, some way. But so anyway, we're going to be talking about 3 topics today. The first is going to be for 4 boxes of liberty, and that's not going to mean much to you now, but it will as we get into it. And the second, if I can even get to it, honestly. And the second is going to be the latest proposals that are coming out of the school shooting incident, the latest legislative proposals. They're awesome. I'm sure that you're going to be made aware of that, if you're not already. And third and last, but not least for sure, is the oh-so-controversial arming of teachers on high school campuses and whatnot. So we'll talk about all 3 of those topics, hopefully today, on the Common Constitutionalist video podcast. Back again. Yay.
You are listening.
No, you limey. They're not listening. They're watching.
The Common Constitutionalist, broadcasting from an undisclosed location, free from the prying eyes of establishment black helicopters.
All right. So once again, I'm on my son's college campus, and I'm about the only one here. He's over at his dorm collecting some stuff that he forgot. They've got their week's break this coming week. And so it's actually a nice opportunity. I could pretty much go wherever I want and not be disturbed by a bunch of college children. Anyway, so let's start on this thing. Number 1 out of the chute here is called 4 Boxes of Liberty. And this is by Gary DeMar at Constitution.com. And Gary was actually instrumental in my early writings, but don't hold that against him. Whatever. So he wrote an article called The 4 Boxes of Liberty, and I've broken it down somewhat. It's not a huge, really long article, but it's long enough to where I was able to pull snippets out of it and still get the point across. So I pulled out some rather powerful quotes. The first one is from Frederick Douglass. We all know Frederick Douglass, right? And again, this is called 4 Boxes of Liberty, and we'll get to that. It'll become obvious in a minute here. Quote from Frederick Douglass: "The true remedy for the fugitive slave bill is a good revolver, a steady hand, and a determination to shoot down any man attempting to kidnap," unquote. He also said, quote, "A man's right rests in 3 boxes. 3, okay? This is called 4 boxes, but he said that a man's rights rest in 3 boxes. The ballot box, the jury box, and the cartridge box." And they were in that order, I might add. The ballot box first, jury box second, if the ballot box is unsuccessful, and then the cartridge box as a last resort. So the late Georgia Congressman Larry McDonald, he died in like the 80s or something like that, he added a 4th box. And he said, quote, "There are 4 boxes to be used in the defense of liberty: soap, ballot, jury, and ammo." So a soap box first, a ballot box second, the jury box, and then an ammunition box or a cartridge box, however you want to describe it. And I think we know what that is. And he also reiterated, "Please use in that order," unquote. So here's how the 4 boxes in the defense of liberty have been described. The soap box represents exercising one's right to freedom of speech, to influence politics, to defend liberty. The ballot box represents exercising one's right to vote, to elect a government which defends liberty. The jury box represents using jury nullification to refuse to convict someone being prosecuted for breaking an unjust law. Fingers ain't working today. I don't know what the deal is. It's got a little chilly out, but whatever. Okay, so let's try that over again. The jury box represents using jury nullification to refuse to convict someone being prosecuted for breaking an unjust law that decreases liberty. Get rid of these silly things. And the cartridge box, or ammo box, represents exercising one's right to keep and bear arms to oppose in armed conflict a government that decreases liberty. The 4 boxes in that order, and they're supposed to be used in that order, represent increasingly forceful and increasingly controversial methods of political action, writes DeMar. So, would you like to guess who said the following? Let's see. Quote, violence exercised in self-defense, which all societies from the most primitive to the most cultured and civilized accept as moral and legal. The principle of self-defense, even involving weapons and bloodshed, has never been condemned, even by Gandhi. So, who wrote that? Who said that? Well, if you guessed Martin Luther King Jr., you'd be correct. And the key qualifier here, as DeMar points out, is self-defense. All right? Self-defense against an attacker, self-defense against the government. It's really no different, folks. Then he moves on to Condoleezza Rice. And this is interesting because you think of Martin Luther King as a civil rights activist, and you think of Frederick Douglass and these guys as civil rights activists, slave activists, civil rights activists. You don't really think of Condoleezza Rice in these terms. You know, she's a highly educated Republican, and from a Republican administration, and she's just, she should be the next NFL commissioner, in my opinion. See you, Goodell. But anyway, you don't think of her in these terms, but growing up, after you hear how she grew up, maybe you'll think of her a little different. Gary writes that then there's this from Condoleezza Rice describing what took place during the bombings in Birmingham, Alabama in 1963. She lived through these things. You would never know that because she doesn't wear it out on her sleeve. Quote, when Dad got home after the first bombs went off, Daddy didn't say anything more about the bomb. He just went outside and sat on the porch with his gun on his lap. He sat there all night looking for white knight riders. If you don't know what white knight riders are, look it up. Not good people. Eventually, Daddy and the men of the neighborhood formed a watch. They would take shifts. Now, this is, again, Condoleezza Rice. You don't think of her in these terms. You should start. Eventually, Daddy and the men of the neighborhood formed a watch. They would take shifts at the head of the entrances to our streets. There was a formal schedule, and Daddy would move among to pray and then to keep their spirits up. Occasionally, they would fire a gun into the air to scare off intruders, but they never actually shot anyone. Gee, I wonder why. Maybe because they were armed and it was obvious that they were armed, so people didn't come. A call-in because they weren't a gun-free zone. Ha! Get it? Because of this experience, and this is still a quote from Condoleezza Rice, because of this experience, I'm a fierce defender of the Second Amendment and the right to bear arms. Had my father and his neighbor listen to this, had my father and his neighbors registered their weapons, Bull Connor, if you don't know who Bull Connor was, he was a bag of crap, Dixiecrat, Southern Democrat, not a Republican. Bull Connor surely would have confiscated them or worse, and surely he would have. The Constitution speaks of the right to a well-regulated militia. The inspiration for this was the founding fathers' fear of the government. They insisted that the citizens have the right, if necessary, to resist the authorities themselves. What better example of this responsible gun ownership is there than what the men of my neighborhood did in response to the KKK and Bull Connor, unquote. This is the whole point of this whole Second Amendment issue, gun confiscation issue and whatnot. And I think it's rather poignant that she said that if the blacks of that era had registered their weapons, they would have been confiscated. They would have been taken away because now all the white Southern racist Dixiecrats would have known where the guns are, and they would have just come take them away And then that's their increasing measure of control over the blacks of the South during the 1960s. It was ridiculous. And so that's why in the Second Amendment there's a right to keep and bear arms that shall not be infringed. And we're not going to bother to get into the daggum militia, which is basically the way George Mason described it. Look him up, founding father, one of my favorite anti-federalist founding fathers. The way he described militia is every guy, every man, every woman who could carry and maintain a weapon, they are the militia, the everyman. Okay, so it's not the Army and it's not the National Guard. The militia is us. We are the first responder. Condoleezza Rice's daddy, as she called him, her father, and their neighborhood, they were the neighborhood militia. They were the first responders to keep their families safe. And that's the way it has to be. So there's your 4 boxes of liberty. The ballot box, the jury box, the soap box, the ballot box, the jury box, and the cartridge box, the ammo box, in that order. There's your 4 boxes of liberty. Good on you, Gary. Great article. I'll be right back. I'm back with segment 2, which is the latest proposals coming out as a result of the latest school shooting. Then this is from the Response Action Network, and as I've explained in previous video and audio podcasts, I get these these Response Action Network email alerts letting me know what's going on and from what source and things like that. So they write, as the emotional spasm that engulfed the nation in the wake of the Florida school shooting runs its course, attention turns to what Congress might do and what the president wants them to do. Via Politico, yay, Politico, yeah, we get an idea of what may be on the political agenda. Frankly, I have an idea of what's on the political agenda. And if reports are true, it scares the living crap out of me, and it should you too. Whether you're a gun rights person, whether you're a gun owner, whether you're a Second Amendment advocate, whatever, defender, or not, it should scare the crap out of you. Because this is a slippery slope that we're on, folks. So President Donald Trump, they write, President Donald Trump is extremely eager for the legislative action on guns and has pushed lawmakers he has spoken to for a vote in the House this coming week. Of course this won't happen, thank heavens. The House is in session for just one day and things simply do not move that quickly. But lawmakers who have spoken to the president say the urgency with which he would like to proceed is unprecedented in his presidency. Or frankly, it should be in any presidency. And that's why we have the federalist system that we have. So we don't get, man, sometimes I just feel like a broken record. It just keeps going. It's a lather, rinse, repeat. It's always the same thing. You cannot, it's impossible to derive good legislation from an emotional response like this. And the faster you react, like a true democracy, mob rule, the faster you react, the worse the legislation is going to be. That's the way it is. And good on the House if they want to slow things down and deliberate this thing, give everybody a chance to take a breath and say, okay, we are not looking for a solution for just this single school shooting. What we're looking for is a long, ongoing solution. And if there isn't a good, long, ongoing solution, then no law is better than bad law. And people have to suck it up, get a spine, and say that. Go out in public and say, look, this is bad law. It's not going to solve anything. It may end up making things worse. And so I'm not going to vote for it because bad law is worse than no law. And you've got to do it that way. So let's not be so quick to act. Despite the pressure, despite the political pressure, and the pressure from all these students that really don't know enough. And you can't blame the kids, and you can't blame the parents. These people are ticked off, they've lost loved ones, they're upset, and they're looking for answers. Unfortunately, they're looking to the government for answers, and that's the last place you'd be looking for, because they do nothing else good but screw things up. The only thing they're good at is to screw things up. That's it. So here's what's being discussed, according to Response Action Network. Spending a here we go, right off the bat. Spending a pile of money on police programs, yay. Because money always fixes everything, right? We throw government money at a problem and it automatically fixes everything. It's never fixed anything. It's always made it worse. Funding some sort of volunteer program to protect schools, okay. A new background check system, which is going to work just as poorly as the old background check system, because as I've explained in a previous article, or I don't even know what, they all kind of run together after a while, I guess. But as I explained, I believe it was in a previous article, that it's like all these background check systems and whatnot, basically they're just stupid computer databases. They have to be accessed, they have to be inputted by humans. Someone has to manipulate these things to get proper information out of them. They don't do the stuff automatically. So that's what has to happen. And if you don't input anything, period, you're not going to get anything out. If you input the incorrect information, or if you input information that isn't accurate, that's what you're going to get out. Inaccurate data. So flawed data. That's why this Cruz kid passed every background check. It wasn't because the background checks are flawed. It's because he wasn't in the system because of the Promise program from Obama that he skirted through. He wasn't. He didn't get. They didn't stop him. Any time that he was questioned and whatnot, it didn't get put in the database because of this Promise program. And if you don't know the Promise program, you can read a couple of my articles. You can look it up. You'll learn. It's fascinating and scary as crap. So anyway, the Fix NICS Act, a bill that would penalize government entities for not reporting information to the National Instant Criminal Background Check System. And this has already passed the House. So they're going to, the government screws this up. They don't do their job. And what are we going to do? We're going to pass another act so the government can fix what they screwed up. Brilliant. That's terrific. That's just great. So you go to a mechanic, and he does nothing. He never fixes your car. He always makes it worse. He never fixes the problem. You go to go get the brakes done, the front brakes done, and he changes your rear tires. This is the way the government works. And now we're going to create a new act, and we're going to spend more money on a bill and more money on a database. We're not going to actually fix the underlying problem, that the government is completely useless in this area, and it actually should be a private entity that's doing these background checks. They'll be responsible because they'll be held to be responsible, whereas the government, you can't hold the government responsible unless they want to be held responsible. Whew. So, what is likely to happen, they write? Increasing the minimum age for purchasing some weapons and banning assault weapons. I don't think either of them, frankly, are going to happen. As a matter of fact, isn't it Florida, or one of the states is actually, they've put forth a state bill that is going to decrease now the age that you can buy a handgun, which is now 21. For long guns and shotguns, it's 18, and for handguns nationwide, it's 21. There is going to be a state, I can't remember which one it is, that is discussing lowering the handgun back to 18, to where it actually should be. So, interesting proposal. That's quietly being considered. Giving cops the ability, oh boy, here we go. Giving cops the ability to confiscate a gun for 21 days. Now listen, you got to listen very carefully. You don't have to read between the lines on this, but you got to listen to every word. Giving cops the ability to confiscate a gun for 21 days if there are reports of domestic abuse, mental health issues, or threats. The 21-day period could be renewed twice, all right? So now you're talking 2-3 months. Under a plan that's being discussed. All right, so even if there's a report of suspected domestic abuse, mental health issue, or threats, the cops can come take your weapons away. What if it's found that these reports are bogus? What if it's found that the people that accused you of something are lying? What do? You've lost your weapon. What would happen? What would happen? Would it even be looked into if, by chance, some law-abiding citizen, somebody makes a complaint about domestic abuse or mental health or something, okay, accuses them of rape, or accuses them of something that we're seeing more and more often, where these cases are somebody just accuses of something and they're automatically damned and condemned and tried and convicted in the press before anything ever comes out, and then some of them end up being innocent. So you're an innocent, law-abiding guy. Somebody accuses you of something you know you didn't do. Meanwhile, they come take your gun away, and then you get into an altercation, or somebody tries to come into your house to steal your stuff, and they shoot you dead. And then 2 weeks later, somebody finds out that, son of a gun, the report of domestic abuse or violence against or mental health, that was a false report. What do? You ain't going to get what are you going to do? Come back to life? Are they going to put a legislative issue that if you're found innocent after that, they'll resuscitate you? They'll give you to Dr. Frankenstein and he'll bring you back to life? That's not going to happen. It's ridiculous. Most of this crap is absolutely, utterly ridiculous. You know what? I'm done with this. I just can't talk about this anymore because it's so daggum frustrating. And it's hard to say with this president whether he's serious about this stuff or not, or whether it's a negotiating technique. Same with the tariffs, and my next article is going to be about tariffs. Oh boy. Nothing's been enacted on tariffs, just like nothing's been enacted on this. Right now, it's all talk and bluster. That's all it is, and particularly by the president. He has a habit of doing this kind of stuff and then taking the conservative position when the legislation rolls around, or he does some executive order, which I don't agree with executive orders, but whatever. When the rubber hits the road, he ends up being, honestly, I don't know what time it is, but whatever it is. There we go. I think it might be 3. Hey, it's 3 o'clock. And all's well. So one would hope that he's not going to make the mistake of doing these dopey legislative things where they're going to pass anti-constitutional, unconstitutional laws that limit your Second Amendment rights. We'll see. Be right back.
You're watching the Common Constitutionalist video podcast.
Yeah, baby!
All right, I'm back for the final segment, and this segment is arming teachers. It's oh so controversial, don't you know? This is by Breitbart. Now, a lot of people don't like Breitbart, and it doesn't matter whether you like them or not. If they're right, they're right. This could be written by the Huffington Post, and I can't stand the Huffington Post, or Salon, or The Nation, or something, or MoveOn.org, whatever. But if they make a good point, who cares who wrote it? Doesn't really make any difference, does it? So this is from Breitbart. School districts that already have armed teachers stand out as an example of for what schools with gun-free designations can do to assure student safety. For example, Fox 5 reports that Texas, now listen to this, because you never hear this in the mainstream media. Most people don't even know this. Fox 5 in Texas reports that Texas has 1,000 school districts, and approximately 170 of those districts allow teachers right now and school staff to be armed on campus for self-defense. These armed districts do not make news. Of course they don't make news. Nobody wants to report on these people, certainly not the gun nuts, the anti-gun nuts, that is. These armed districts do not make news with reports of accidental shootings, students getting their teachers' guns, which we all hear. Oh, somebody's going to be shot accidentally. Oh, some thug kid's going to steal the gun and shoot up the school. That stuff doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen. The proof is facts. Facts, people. Or armed faculty committing crimes on campus. Rather, they enjoy not making news, as the deterrent of having certain teachers armed appears to make attackers think twice before striking. And that's the whole point about me. I've told you before that I'm an open carry guy, and the reason why I'm an open carry guy, and it's the exact opposite. There's a 180-degree difference between me open and carrying from my own personal self-defense and the people in my circle of influence at the time. And school teachers, you don't want to be an open carry school teacher because you're a marked man or woman, or the perp is just simply going to avoid you if they know which people to avoid. It just makes it that much easier to infiltrate. It just does. So by concealed carrying, not everybody, and all you need is like maybe a half a dozen to a dozen teachers that concealed carry, and you never know where they're going to be, and you never know who they're going to be, and so the perp is just going to walk by and go to the gun-free school and shoot that one up, or do something untoward. That's the way it works. The Callisburg Independent School District, which is about 85 miles north of Dallas, has had armed teachers. Listen to this. Did you people know this? Nobody knew this. Has had armed teachers for about 4 years, and a school superintendent, Steve Clugson, simply views it as part of what must be done to protect his students. He says, quote, "We'll do whatever's necessary to protect our kids and staff. We don't want to be at the mercy of somebody that's intending to do harm," which is exactly what you're going to do if you have to hunker down and do these shooter drills, active shooter drills, hide underneath your desk like the 1950s nuclear bomb drills, and hope to crap everything's going to be okay until the first responder police show up, and assuming they even enter the building because they're chicken blanks. It's going to take 5 to 10 minutes, and the average shooting is over in 2 to 5 minutes. That's it, and then they're done. They're gone. He added, quote, who added? Oh yeah, he added it doesn't matter. Fox 5, that's it. He added, quote, "We're trying to put our teachers in a position to be better equipped to protect their kids. And I have complete faith in our team, as well you should, and they're willing to stand up and protect our people. And if you're trained and you have the right attitude, this is what can happen. A peaceful school with no incidents." Fox 6 reports that Arkansas's Clarksville School District took a similar approach following the December 14, 2012 attack on Sandy Hook Elementary School. They didn't go run and hide under their desk. They didn't demand confiscation of guns. They did the exact opposite. They armed their teachers and their staff. In 2013, KARK reported that the district could not afford to hire full-time security guards, so they trained and armed a number of teachers and staff to be commissioned school security officers. And what the crap is so wrong with that? It isn't. Not to mention that if you are a school security officer, a hired security officer, 9 times out of 10 you're going to be wearing a uniform. Go back to infiltration. Who are you going to avoid? The guy in uniform. Duh. Okay? This ain't rocket science, people. It just isn't. Teachers in South Dakota are being trained and okay, let's try that. Let's try that one again. Teachers in South Dakota are being trained and carrying guns under the state's new School Sentinel program, and teachers in Utah have been. Listen to this. Did anybody know this? Of course not. The press would have conniptions if this ever got out on a mass scale. Teachers in Utah have been carrying guns on campus for self-defense for over 15 freaking years. Unbelievable. On June 26, 2017, Breitbart News reported that a number of Colorado school teachers were enrolled in a faster faculty administrator safety training and emergency response program. Wow, that's a mouthful. So they can carry guns on campus for defense of themselves and their students. And there are numerous school districts with armed teachers in Ohio and other states around the country as well. Who knew this? Nobody. Nobody knew this. It's high time that people did know this. So when President Trump pushes to arm 20% of teachers in school safety, he is not pushing something unproven or untested. See, that's the thing. And unfortunately, nobody's coming to his defense when he says stuff like this. They just say, oh, that's just ridiculous. We can't arm. Oh, there's going to be incidents. Teachers are going to shoot up the school. Students are going to steal. None of this crap ever happened. And you never hear of these things. You just never hear of them because there's no incident. If it bleeds, it leads. There ain't no bleeding. There's no incident. There's no shooting. There's no accidental shooting. There's no accidental discharge. Nothing. Nothing happens, and nothing will.
And that, as they say, is that. So this has been the Common Constitutionalist video podcast. Have a blessed balance of the weekend, and I am out.